Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Hope you all had a wonderful lunch. Definitely, this is not going to make you sleep. We are going to have many more energizing speakers this afternoon. Let me have the honors of introducing this afternoon's speakers. The first one, our first speaker of the afternoon session is Swan Lee, who is a co-founder of Asian American Coalition for Education. Ms. Swan Lee not only founded Asian American Coalition for Education, but she is also an equal rights activist. Swan has organized numerous assemblies to advance equality, dignity, and respect for all Americans. In late 2013, Swan helped launch nationwide protests against ABC's genocide, normalizing content such as, "Should we allow Chinese to live?" Ms. Lee also helped organize the opposition against Asian Registry Bill H3361 in Massachusetts, protests against cultural violence. In addition, she has promoted efforts to make Asian American category comparable with other racial categories by removing the constricting sub-Asian boxes on census form. Since 2014, Swan has taken an active role in AACE's administrative complaints against several Ivy League colleges to the U.S. Justice and Department of Education, helping general community support from more than 270 partner organizations, nationwide grassroots groups. As the national nonprofit leader in advancing equal education rights, AACE consistently energizes far-reaching media impact by imposing entrenched educational issues and leading dynamic dialogues. Ms. Lee has appeared on live debates hosted by the New York Times, PBS, WBH, and has been featured in interviews at prestigious media outlets. Let me have the honors of inviting Ms. Swan Lee on the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope the lunch doesn't make everybody dizzy. I want to especially address the impact of the Asian American voice in this discourse about racial factor. Sometimes I think it's a misnomer called affirmative action because it's totally different from President Kennedy's version of affirmative action. I had a very interesting experience to share with this NPR reporter, Kirk. He works in higher education reporting. After we filed an administrative complaint to Department of Justice and Department of Education, Kirk interviewed me, and that first segment was put on All Things Considered on NPR. I generated a lot of attention. And so in 2017, one day Kirk called me. He said he wants to talk to me about something. So I went there, and he looked very disturbed. He said New York Times reporter dug up some information and found Department of Justice is investigating about the racial factors influencing college admissions. And at that day, there was a media thunderstorm. A lot of media are very angry. They feel this is the administration trying to get rid of racial factor that will be unfair to minority students. So Kirk asked me what I think of this Department of Justice investigation. I said, oh, it's great. I said, it's a wave of fresh air because we feel so suffocated and despair in this conversation. We have no voice. And now, finally, the government is doing something. Our voice is finally being heard. This is really a welcome change. So as Kirk listened to me, I can see, not exactly angry, but he was very disturbed and upset. And that interview was done. He put it into a program. And the next day, he called me again. He said, can you come here again? And so I went there again. He said, actually, the Department of Justice spokeswoman, she said, Department of Justice is investigating into your organization's complaint. It's filed by 64 Asian American organizations. And he asked me what I thought of it. So I shared my, more of my insights about it. And this time, Kirk had a totally different response. He was smiling and grinning. He was nodding with me, like so happy. So I feel that's very thought-provoking. It's the same thing that happens. Department of Justice is investigating into anti-Asian discrimination. But why does Kirk feel angry if it's just, Department of Justice is doing it, and he has a totally different response when it's because of Asian American students' complaint, and that's why they are investigating. So I feel a lot of Americans, they are supporting affirmative action because of a misunderstanding. They thought the minority talked about in this policy includes Asian American students. And they thought Asian American students are benefiting from this, sort of lowering the academic standards. That's why they support it. Also, I heard a liberal scholar on NPR, he shared his experiences. He said he does not support affirmative action anymore. He used to support it. He thought all the minority students benefited, but now he realized this is like a whack-a-mole game. He saw the hammer only whacks the white students. So he was, sort of okay with that. But now he realized a lot of the students that get whacked are Asian American. And he cannot, honestly, from his heart, he cannot support this kind of practice. So I think the addition of the Asian American voice really fundamentally changes the discourse on racial considerations in college admissions. I want to share with you one stanza from the new clauses. It's etched on Statue of Liberty. I think it's very interesting. It said, "Give me your tired, your poor, huddled masses that yearning to be free." I think that is very thought-provoking. It doesn't, these people, these immigrants, they are poor, but it doesn't say they are yearning to be rich. It says they are yearning to be free, because that's what immigrants really come to this country for, the freedom. Freedom to be whoever we want to be, regardless our social background, our cultural background, or what kind of ethnic attributes we're born with. And this is very different from where we came from. In some countries, it has a more collective system. People are divided into pretty frigid classes or different categories based on what your grandfather owned. Then you are in the landowner class, and that is, you have to carry that label, the stigma, all your life, and opportunities are just taken away from you and given to other students whose grandpa happened to be broke at the country's beginning. But sometimes it's because their grandfather was a drug addict and blew away the family's savings. So we come here, we expect to be treated as an equal citizen without having us our opportunities hindered or taken away because of our race. Why? Because we are born with race. It is an immutable factor, which means it cannot be changed. It's not a personal choice. None of us choose to be the race we are. Well, I didn't choose to be Asian, which I don't mind, but I don't want to be treated as a specific generic member of a specific racial or ethnic group. That is a lot of assumption, but rather we want to be just free as a total whole American. And that is a very different kind of philosophy that I see some of the policies are moving towards. There has been a wave of bills that are trying to register the ancestral origin of our citizens. In Massachusetts, we fought against this Asian Registry Bill, H 3361, which singled out the Asian American group. It asked them to put down on all the government forms and quasi-agency forms, they have to specify their ancestral origin, where their ancestor came from. And they will be treated differently. We fought very vehemently against that, and we defeated last year. But this year, of course, the politician brought it back. But this time, it seeks to divide all the residents of Massachusetts, no matter what race. No matter you're Black or European American, everybody now has to specify their ancestral origin. And that is very humiliating. Think about our African Americans. a lot of them don't know where their ancestors are from. They have no choice, and now they have to put down like which country their ancestors came from. That is a very bizarre policy, and that's the bothersome trend that some of the policies are just moving towards. It's just trying to divide the population into smaller and smaller groups, and we'll try to balance in equitable representation, but from an arbitrary government approach, instead of giving people the freedom to make personal choices, the levels of success they want to achieve, or the kind of interests they want to pursue and make accordingly the personal efforts. So that is why we are fighting for this equality. As we observed in the Fisher case, Fisher got a lot of attacks. Why? Because she is a white student. But with the country responded to the Asian American plaintiffs much more differently, much more kindly. We didn't really get attacked. I mean, I didn't get much attack from anybody. The groups that only attacked us happen to be some other special interest Asian American organizations. And they have always defended this. And they are behind these ethnic registry bills that are trying to sweep over the country right now to register all the citizens' ancestral origins. Whether your family is from Venezuela or from Congo, you have to be as specified as possible. So there is a very bothersome trend, and they have called us some very insulting names. Without communicating with us and asking our perspective, they just called us a wedge. At first I was like thinking, what does wedge mean? And then I realized they have like sort of a people of color versus white people race war. And they think if Asian Americans complain about discrimination, then it's being a wedge in this race war. And also they call us, they wrote some articles that said, these people just want to be white. And we find all of this very vulgarizing the fight for equality, and also very arbitrary and presumptuous. They don't know us personally. They have no idea who we want to be or what we want to be. They're just making this kind of slandering statements that are really very insulting. So I'm really curious about them. But also they pushed some rhetoric that they always use. They cycle them to defend racial factor. I want to list a few of them. First, they say this is because of slavery system. And so African Americans are still suffering from the consequences of slavery system. And affirmative action is sort of reparations to correct that wrong. And that Asian Americans, a lot of them are immigrants because of the Chinese Excluding Act. So the immigration was only instituted in last century, like after 1943, and very small at first. So Asian American immigrants have very different point of view, and they can see all this rhetoric is very false and it's very weak and cannot withstand any closer examination. No country is really that great a couple of centuries ago. While America had a slavery system, in China it was ruled by emperors that are really brutal and violent. They can cut off the head of any citizen if they want. So in a sense, we're all the emperor's slaves. And in some other countries, there was also slavery system and all kinds of very bad system. But we look around in the world, most countries, they have learned lessons from that bad history. But nobody is holding that as sort of a self-defacing source of inconfidence in them, which I think is very damaging to African American children. Imagine you've been told, because of slavery now you're sort of, we cannot expect the full expectation from you. We have to do something. That is way more damaging than just tell them, everybody is equal. And because we human beings, we are very much incredibly, we can self-heal. Every day we are a new person. So I think it's very important we should restore the confidence in all of our citizens. We cannot just tell children you need this from government because you cannot do it by yourself. That is very bad. For example, the president of AAC, Yu Kongzhao, he was in the Cultural Revolution when he was a school kid. And because of that social unrest, there was very little educational opportunities. The schools a lot of them are just closed. So he didn't have much opportunities to education at all, but he taught himself. And many first-generation immigrants, they had very similar circumstances. Like myself, I didn't have any books to read when I was a kid, very little. I read a couple of books and I was hooked. I was thinking, oh, books is such wonderful, it takes me to another world. But I couldn't find any books. I remember myself walking miles to a nearby high school, like just approaching school students, ask them if they have a book to spare, if they can give to me. It's really difficult. But what pulled us through is our parents' unconditional belief and confidence in us. They never tell us, because of poverty or because of this, the injustice, our family has suffered in this tiered system of class classifications because of your grandpa, you cannot do anything. No. They always tell us we can be the smartest person we want, We can do anything in the world at all if we set our heart to it. So I think that makes a very big difference from this kind of racial consideration system, which doesn't have full confidence in some citizens just because of some history from a couple of centuries ago. I find that itself is very racially discriminatory. And also the socioeconomic status. Yes, we conditionally support, even though I'm not really sure if that actually helps people at all. Because like Yukon and me and many people, we actually are very poor. We grew up in sheer poverty. And it doesn't mean we're compromising anyway. I don't want anybody to think I'm any less intelligent or any way compromised just because I grew up in poverty. I'm just has much potential as anybody at all. All I need is my brain, then I can do anything in the world if I want. So I think that is also a very different philosophy. And also, we examine the diversity, which is a Sparky case, Supreme Court case says race can be considered for diversity. But what does equitable representation mean? The colleges are not just places you pick a certain number of people from each group for representation. Actually, students, they compete with their academic excellence and their extracurricular activities and their personal essays for these spots. It's not just being represented. That's very passive. And also, we see a lot of media reporting and articles, they say Asian Americans are overrepresented in colleges. And that is a very hurting statement to hear. Why? Because while we are talking about making reparations for other racial groups because of slavery, we also suffer from a lot of anti-Asian discrimination laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act, where Chinese immigrants were not allowed to marry and have kids. They are not allowed to procreate. They don't want a lot of Asians in this country, and they cannot immigrate here. As a result, a lot of precious economic opportunities were taken away. People cannot become citizens, they cannot have kids, they cannot invest, they cannot save and buy house or land or anything. So a lot of opportunities were taken away and at the benefit of other racial groups. But instead of talking about reparations for us, they are actually holding this against us as an excuse for discrimination. They say you are the smallest racial group. And anywhere, if the percentage of Asian American students exceed 5%, then you are overrepresented. Then they feel they have an excuse to take away opportunities from students of Asian descent and given to other racial groups. So this is very hurting and unfair, and it directly unravels that logic of reparations. We're not getting any reparations, and we're not asking for it. We just want equality. And instead, they are holding the result of anti-Asian discrimination and use that to discriminate against us, trying to limit us at 5% everywhere in the country. And that is a very scary idea, because think about it. Why do we want to recreate the population percentages of the national census at every school, every agency, every institution of America? That is impossible. For example, Asian American might be 5% nationally, but it's about 15% in Massachusetts. It's almost the second largest racial group. And at many states, it is a very large racial group. So when you look at the Harvard case and you say, oh, they are 20%, but they only have 5% of percentage nationally. But this rhetoric is totally logically wrong. The national population percentage has nothing with an area's local population percentage. And it especially have nothing to do with the percentage of racial groups in the applicant pool to a college. So when you're arbitrarily taking the national census population percentage and try to recreate it in every college's institutions, you have to do a lot. You have to take away people's equality and their freedom. You have to use very much centralized power to make this happen. Maybe they can do it one day, but it cannot be done without sacrificing our equality and a lot of our constitutional rights. When they achieve that, America will not be America anymore. It will be even worse than a lot of other countries in the world. So we definitely condemn this definition of overrepresentation, underrepresentation using the national census population percentage. It's totally arbitrary and misguided and foolish. Lastly, I want to talk about how 70% of Americans actually stand with us. They clearly indicate in surveys that racial factor should not be a factor in the college admissions. And why is that? Because grassroots parents like Gwen, we want solid education, K-12 education of quality for our children. We don't care if just a few students are pulled from our racial group to make up a certain diversity picture at a college. That does not help my children. That does not help our children. That is only a way to cover up and ignore the problems that exist in K-12 education. And that is doing our children wrong. That is why we don't support using racial factor to manufacture fake diversity at colleges, because that will leave the problems unsolved. And our children will continue to suffer from it before they remove racial factor and have to produce natural organic diversity at colleges without using arbitrary approach based on people's immutable racial attributes. So that has to be done. They are an Asian American organization, and they say they represent Asian Americans in fighting for civil rights. But anytime Asian Americans cry against anti-Asian discrimination, they try to put it out. They just publish a few articles, call you a wedge, call you want to be white, and then it could die down. So I want to know where they are coming from. I want to know exactly why are they supporting this when they should be supporting equality and fair opportunities. So I think I finally got an answer because a couple of weeks ago, Columbia University, the Asia Society panel, and she finally said towards the end, because of Rainbow Coalition. So I finally got a clear answer why they are supporting it. Rainbow Coalition. Okay, so I have that information. So I did a little bit of research into what Rainbow Coalition is. And what I found is very interesting. You can look for it yourself. Rainbow Coalition is sort of a pact between some street gangs in 1960s, in the late 1960s. It's between some far leftist gangs like the Red Guard Party of San Francisco, which according to Wikipedia, they are far leftist. They believe in like Marxism and Maoism, and it's violent. And at that time, there were a lot of conflicts between these gangs in 1960s. I guess it was not a very stable period. And somehow to sort out these gang conflicts, they formed a sort of rainbow coalition to support each other. So a lot of the rhetoric they used to support Harvard in the discrimination case is really just from that year, where you can see their students are doing a Harvard supporting assembly. The signs they hold is yellow peril supports black power. So they have these Asian American students call themselves yellow peril. So I feel that is very interesting because Rainbow Coalition is a pact between gangs in the 1960s. Based on the fact they call themselves gangs means it never had wide appeal to the society, even at that time. And it doesn't have any legal binding power on the citizens at that time, and especially doesn't have any legally binding power on the citizens now. So they cannot expect us to be a member of that kind of coalition just based on our skin color, our ethnicity. They cannot just automatically assume you must do what they want you to do and vote whatever they want you to vote for and support whatever they want you to support. Otherwise, they will call you a wedge. That is a very, very misguided and not to mention very insulting position they are taking. So I finally figured out it supports racial consideration because of Rainbow Coalition, which is a very small crowd ideology. And most of Americans actually do not follow that. It has nothing to do with Constitution. It's more about gang politics, and it does not have any binding power on our citizens. So that gives me a sense of hope, because we know we can move forward towards a more racially equal society, because most people do not belong to Rainbow Coalition, or they do not have any obligation to join it. Thank you all.